Today, I want to share with you 5 harsh truths about the home cleaning profession that almost no one talks about. However, if you know them early, you can avoid a lot of disappointment and keep your home tidy for much longer. The story begins yesterday afternoon when Frank, was sitting in a small cafe downtown and unexpectedly ran into David, my friend, who had worked with me in the cleaning industry for nearly 15 years. I've been out of the business for a few years now, spending more time with my family and on my hobbies. But when I saw David, all the memories from the job came flooding back, the days we cleaned everything from tiny downtown apartments to sprawling suburban mansions filled to the brim. David smiled and asked if I remembered Mrs. Helen's project, a house we spent an entire week transforming from a place piled high with belongings into a bright, breathable space. Of course I remembered, because just a few months after we finished, I went back and found it messy all over again. And it wasn't the only case. Many clients we had served, even those who were initially excited and determined to maintain order, eventually slipped back into their old state. Sitting there with David, we talked about why that happens, and we both agreed there are 5 truths about this profession that everyone should know before they start decluttering. These are not only professional insights, but also life lessons. Today I'll share them with you as if you're sitting at that cafe table with us. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you find this story helpful, and leave a comment letting us know where you're from. Your support is the motivation for me to keep sharing the real experiences and lessons I've gathered over many years in this profession. Thank you for being here now. Let's move on to the first truth. Truth 1. Cleaning alone is not enough. David started with a question we've heard over and over from clients. Do you know why some homes that have been cleaned from top to bottom can be messy again in just a few weeks? I immediately thought of Mrs. Helen, an elderly client we once helped. At the time, her house was packed. Closets stuffed full, kitchen counters piled with jars, boxes, bags, and items kept just in case. We spent an entire week sorting, discarding what was broken, donating what was still good, and organizing everything. When we were done, she was thrilled and promised to keep it that way. But 2 months later, I came back to return an item we had overlooked, and what I saw left me stunned. The kitchen was once again filled with plastic bags, new containers, spice jars, and even a few items she had previously agreed to give away. When we sat down to talk, she admitted she still kept the habit of buying things on sale and accepting anything her family brought over. That's exactly why David said cleaning, without changing the habit of bringing things into the home, is like putting a bandage on a broken bone. In the trade, we call this inflow everything coming into your home. To keep a home tidy, long-term, you must control inflow, maintain outflow items going out, create a functional storage system, and most importantly, change your mindset. For seniors, this is especially difficult due to shopping habits, the save-it-for-later mentality, and the tendency to accept gifts from loved ones. We introduced Mrs. Helen to the one-in, one-out rule. For every new item that comes in, one must go out. Limiting space was also part of the solution. When the closet was full, she wouldn't buy more. We also involved her family, asking them to help remind her to keep the new order and to avoid bringing in unnecessary items. After that, she was able to maintain order for much longer, and she told us she felt mentally lighter not having to find space for too many new things. Truth 2. Everything is hard, so choose your hard. I told David about Mr. George, a client around 80 years old whom I once worked with. His house was full of old newspapers and broken electronics. The pathways were so narrow he had to turn sideways to walk through. When I suggested getting rid of some items, he shook his head saying he couldn't because he might need them someday to fix something. But he also admitted he had fallen several times after tripping over stacks of newspapers or extension cords stretched across the floor. I sat down, looked him in the eye, and said that the hard part of decluttering is letting go of things you've grown used to. But the hard part of keeping them is living with the constant risk of falling, difficulty cleaning, and feeling cramped every day. Many studies have shown that living in a cluttered environment keeps the body in a constant state of stress, directly affecting sleep and overall health. We started helping him with small steps first, clearing the main walkway, tidying cables, and getting rid of broken devices that even repairmen had given up on. Each session lasted about 15 minutes, so he wouldn't get tired, and every time he saw a new clear space, he smiled. Once the walkways were wide and safe, he told me he slept better because the house felt more breathable. David nodded. When I told him this, then said this is something many people don't realize. Life already has many challenges, but choose the challenges that make you healthier and safer, rather than the ones that exhaust you and keep you living in worry. Truth 3. Use it or lose it. David reminded me of a family we once helped, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. They had kept their late son's room the same for 15 years, as if he had never left. Clothes still hung in the closet, books neatly stacked on the desk, and a pair of sneakers sat under the bed, as though he might come home any moment. When we suggested reorganizing the space so the room could be used, Mrs. Peterson broke down in tears. I understood that feeling because over the years I've met many clients who saw clearing out as erasing a part of their memories. But I explained that keeping things for sentimental reasons is natural. It only becomes a concern when it keeps you trapped in pain. The rule we applied was use it or lose it, meaning if an item isn't being used and doesn't bring joy each time you see it, it's better to let it go. We worked with Mrs. Peterson to choose a few special items to keep her son's sports jersey, a journal, and some family photos. All were placed neatly in a small memory box. Other photos were digitized so she could view them anytime without worrying about damage. The room was then transformed into a reading space, but still kept a small corner with the box and one framed picture as a warm reminder. She later said she could now enter the room every day without the heavy feeling, replaced instead by warmth from the good memories. David smiled and said this was proof that letting go is not about losing, but about choosing to keep what truly matters. Truth 4. Nobody wants your stuff. I told David the story of Mrs. Margaret, a client preparing to move into a nursing home. She was certain her daughter would want the antique dining set she had proudly kept for decades, but when she mentioned it, her daughter declined. It was too large, didn't match her home's style, and there was no room for it. Mrs. Margaret was deeply hurt, thinking her daughter didn't value the piece. I gently explained that I had seen this in many families. It's connected to a psychological effect called the endowment effect, the tendency to value our possessions more highly than their actual market worth. Items we've lived with for years carry deep emotional meaning for us, but to younger generations, they may just be space-consuming objects. Today, many younger people prioritize open space convenience and lightweight, easy-to-move belongings. I suggested Mrs. Margaret pick a few pieces her daughter truly wanted to keep, and we would help find the right place for the rest. Some items were sold to collectors, others donated to charity. When everything was done, she said she felt relieved, knowing her things had gone where they would be used and appreciated instead of gathering dust in storage or ending up in the trash. David nodded, saying this was a hard truth, but one worth accepting. The real value of an item isn't in keeping it forever, but in it being used and loved by someone else. Truth 5. There is no secret. You have to act. David told me about a family that once hired a cleaning service but had spent months beforehand researching different methods. They bought guidebooks, watched videos, and even took an online course on home organization. Yet after all those months, they hadn't started, always feeling they weren't ready or hadn't found the perfect method. When we arrived, the house was still filled with unopened boxes, dusty clothes, and cluttered corners that had been untouched for years. I told them there's no perfect time and no special secret. The difference between a tidy home and a messy one isn't how many methods you know, but whether you start. We began with a very simple rule: 15 minutes at a time, 3 times a week. Each session focused on just one small area: a drawer, a bookshelf, or a corner of a table. After a few weeks, they began to see changes and felt lighter every time they walked in. From then on, they maintained the habit on their own without us reminding them. David looked at me smiling and said, "This is what many people don't realize. All the knowledge and tips in the world mean nothing if you don't take action. No need to wait for the right time or inspiration. Just start with the smallest step today. And keep going, and you'll see more change than you imagined." Sitting in that cafe, David and I looked out at the street where yellow leaves were falling, and we were both quiet for a long moment. We had spent many years in this line of work, witnessing hundreds of homes transformed in just days, but also seeing many return to their old state after a short while. The 5 truths we had just revisited weren't only professional lessons, they were life lessons. Decluttering is not just about removing items, but about changing habits, mindset, and how you see the true value of the things around you. Cleaning alone is not enough. You have to control both what comes in and what goes out. Everything is hard, but you have to choose the hard that brings health and peace. Use it or lose it so you don't stay trapped in the past. Nobody wants your stuff, so decide where it will go. And finally, there's no special secret, just action, one small but steady step at a time. I hope that when you finish hearing this story, you'll look around your own home and choose to start today, even if it's just with one small drawer. A tidy home isn't just a place to live. It's a place to fully enjoy the rest of your life. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If you found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment so I know you're there. Your support is invaluable, and I look forward to seeing you in the next story.